We had expected the immediate former Chief Justice Dr. William Mutunga to join us tonight on NTV. Unfortunately, he fell ill at his Kitui home and he will not be able to join us tonight. We look forward to hosting him in the future. However, we're very excited to have two distinguished advocates here, Nelson Havi and Professor Tom Ojienda, who also sits in the JSC, to talk about exactly what Dr. Mutunga's legacy is. One, it has to be noted that he's retired a year before he was supposed to forestall a crisis if you were to leave a few months to the election. And there's a divided opinion about that. Professor Ojienda, what do you say?
I think that the retirement of the former Chief Justice, Dr. William Mutunga, was informed by the need to ensure that this country has a Chief Justice way before the election. You know that August 2017 is instrumental, right. The date that is significant for elections, and it will take approximately between 166 days to 366 days. Right. Sorry, 166 days to about 5.5 months to get a new Chief Justice.
So within the JSC, yes, internally, were you all for him leaving a year early?
I think it's something we discussed. We had 2 meetings on that question, and encourage the Chief Justice to retire early so that we can commence this process, so that the process can conclude within reasonable time.
All right.
To enable the new Chief Justice prepare his team to put the judiciary in proper preparation for a proper judicial takeover that
okay.
would lead to proper mechanism for dispute resolution in 2017 in the event that would be.
Nelson, is that how you see it?
Well, I don't see it from that perspective. Perhaps JSC could be having information that we don't have. But what we've seen in the public domain indicates that Dr. Mutunga, in actual fact, turned 70 this year on the 16th of June, 2016.
He said he turned 69.
Well, it's 70. If you count from 1946 when he was born, right. It's actually 70.
That is some interesting math.
No. I think Havi, unlike Havi, I sit in the Judicial Service Commission, and right. I'm privy to the documents that were given to us by the Chief Justice, and clearly the Chief Justice turned 69 on 16th of June, right. 2016.
Not 70.
Clearly, no, not 70. And he had intimated his retirement last year. So it is something that he had planned.
Okay.
I think he conceived the need to leave early to allow the Judicial Service Commission to elect a Chief Justice.
Fair enough. In your estimation as a legal practitioner, was he a good Chief Justice?
I do not think he was a very good Chief Justice. He left so much to be desired. I think the only other person we could compare Dr. William Mutunga to will be the late Justice Guy Muli.
Why is that?
I mean, Dr. Mutunga left a very big power vacuum within the Judicial Service Commission and within the JSC itself, thereby allowing external forces to determine the cause of events, not only at the JSC, but in a larger picture at the judiciary. And that, to me, doesn't augur so well, especially to a Chief Justice who came in at a very critical stage when we were implementing the new constitution. And the problems that he has left behind may take a longer period of time to remedy had he done his work otherwise.
Quick reaction to that.
I think, in my view, Larry, I'll tell you this. This is the only Chief Justice to have done so many reforms within such a short time. 11 courts, as he got appointed, now we have 34 court stations.
Okay.
We had only about 46 judges when he was appointed. We have 136 judges. We have a whole framework of environmental and land courts, labor courts. He basically midwifed a new judiciary, okay. Brought confidence in the judiciary. And remember, he came in at a time when the judiciary was at its lowest. Corruption claims, case fixing, a judiciary that had no personnel, no unmotivated staff.
All right.
The Chief Justice has transformed the judiciary more than any other Chief Justice in this country.
Let's leave it there for the moment, because there's a very damning Public Accounts Committee report of the National Assembly that came out about a year ago. We'll get to that when we come back. This was just an introduction. We'll come to this gentleman and speak about that in great detail. Welcome back to NTV Weekend Edition. Nelson Havi and Professor Tom Ojienda are still here with me, advocates. We're talking about the legacy of Dr. William Mutunga as Chief Justice and also what kind of qualities should the next Chief Justice have? There was a Public Accounts Committee of the National Assembly. They put out a very damning report about a year ago based on a JSC special audit. And what they said is that the committee faults the Chief Justice for not providing firm leadership to the judiciary, giving a carte blanche to the then Chief Registrar Gladys Shirley of the judiciary and the JSC in general. And one other point of this says, placing a man with limited public service experience, referring to Dr. Mutunga, and no record of having led a large organization to head a crucial arm of government like the judiciary must not only be questioned, it went on to say, it should be a critical point of consideration in future similar appointments. Professor Ojienda, they basically said that Dr. Mutunga was unable to run an entire arm of government.
I think the audit queries that were raised by the auditor basically were as a result of a number of questions that arose out of the management of the initial affairs by the Judicial Service Commission. I think most of those queries have been answered, and essentially it boiled down to the question of whether the Chief Justice at the time knew the goings-on in the Commission and what the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary was doing, as he was expected as Chief Justice, to ensure that every process was known to himself and to the Judicial Service Commission.
They claimed that the judiciary was almost running on autopilot, that the registrar had too much power.
I think you can imagine a judiciary at the time that was hiring, creating a Supreme Court, hiring judges, hiring magistrates, hiring many personnel, and I think that there may have been a few lapses. These have since been explained, but I also think that the Chief Registrar, the then Chief Registrar, dealt with a number of issues that were finally dealt with or responded to by the Judicial Service Commission. I think that the current Chief Registrar has responded to the queries that were raised. So okay. I know that there were issues then, but I think all those issues have now been dealt with.
All right, as you respond to that, Nelson, I want to talk about Dr. Mutunga himself did mention that we found an institution so frail in its structures, so low on confidence, so deficient in integrity, that to have expected it to deliver justice was to be wildly optimistic. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
That was a very fair assessment, and the optimism was placed upon the shoulder of Dr. William Mutunga. And right from the beginning, there was a big failing in his ability to delegate and supervise. I think if Dr. Mutunga had delegated these responsibilities and maintained proper supervision, wouldn't have had the problem that the Public Accounts Committee came about with. And look at it from this point of view. Who was the head of the Finance Committee at the Judicial Service Commission by that time? It was Nasir Abdullahi.
Yes.
How come then the responsibility for failure to account for funds is now being heaped on the then Chief Registrar of the Judiciary alone?
So are you saying that the failure to account for funds falls squarely under Nasir Abdullahi's doorstep?
Not entirely, but these are separate committees within one organization. And the buck stops with the head of that commission, and this is Dr. William Mutunga. Had he maintained proper oversight over all these committees, and the individuals in charge of these committees will not have seen this problem. And in fact, when he was called upon to respond to these audit queries, his answer was actually passing the buck to other individuals, and the issue was never resolved definitively.
Right.
And much recently, as early as January this year, the Public Accounts Committee again revisited that issue and recommended further investigations by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission with a possibility of profiling charges against those 6 commissioners. So the issue does not appear to have been settled,
okay,
as my good friend Mwalimu here suggests. I think it's still live.
Mwalimu, talk to me about this, because there are 2 very strong viewpoints regarding the Dr. Mutunga's legacies before we leave the subject. One is from the advocate Donald Kipkorir, who said very memorably that his tenure as our first Chief Justice under the Constitution promulgated in August 2010 was hopeless, fickle, uninspiring, and rudderless. Yet, compare that to Nasir Abdullahi, who was also, or he went on to say he reprobated and appropriated in leadership, a leadership that was zilch, basically meaning zero. But Nasir Abdullahi, who used to be in the JSC before you, said, Will is Kenya's best Chief Justice since independence, disregard the cries of corrupt lawyers and other orphans? Your view?
I think that those are very strong views coming from my good friend Don Kipkorir.
Right.
I think you must give it to the Chief Justice that he created structures where there were none. He midwifed a strong judiciary that had confidence in the public where there was none. He transitioned the judiciary from the low that it was to the high that it is now. I think those you must give to the Chief Justice. The questions of weak governance structures that have been referred to by Kipkorir, which talks about the judiciary being rudderless,
yes,
I think emerged from the leadership style of Dr. Willie Mutunga. His leadership style was to allow and to trust people. Unfortunately, the Chief Justice is a very trusting person. So he trusted people under him. He trusted members of the Judicial Service Commission to perform and to do their duties assigned to them. So he was not the hands-on individual or jurist who dealt with every matter himself. He believed that those to whom he assigned duties would have delivered in the best way possible. I think that probably is his weakness, and that we must say robustly. And as a JSC, I'll tell you this, we were alive to this leadership style, and you can see that some of the issues that arose were teething issues that arose during the first JSC. The first JSC, as you will recall, was busy appointing judicial officers, busy appointing personnel to different positions. I'll tell you that all these questions are questions of the past. Of course, we are alive to the fact that perhaps an insider would have dealt with the issues in question differently. But an insider also would probably have brought the baggage of low confidence, the baggage of corruption, the baggage of the problems of the old judiciary to the new judiciary.
Okay.
So let's give it to Mutunga. He did his best. Let the man rest. But let us look forward to a better transition. Let us look forward to having an individual who will move the judiciary from where Judge Mutunga left it to even a stronger position. And as I've told you, you have a Judicial Service Commission that you can trust.
Where do you sit in terms of the scale between best or worst, or somewhere in the middle? Was it transformative, or didn't he do enough?
He didn't do enough, and let me agree with what Don Kipkorir said, and let me also analyze what my friend Ahmed Nasir said. He was the best Chief Justice, and he leaves the corrupt lawyers and the orphans making noise. But you see, as we look forward towards the next Chief Justice, we need to interrogate such issues. Best to who? We need a Chief Justice who will serve the interest of the country, the public interest. Yes, it is true, as a professor said here, Mutunga trusted a lot. Whom did he trust? In today's weekly article by Professor Madowo Mutua,
yes,
Madowo Mutua made it quite clear. Dr. William Mutunga never wanted to be Chief Justice. He was convinced to be Chief Justice. He was taken through the interview process to be Chief Justice. And that will explain a great deal as to why now Dr. Mutunga had to trust the individuals who put him in place. Now, looking forward, we need a Chief Justice who can be a person of his own. He ought to be able to delegate, but he ought to be able to supervise. In essence, if at all he has to continue the Nyaism of Mutunga, then he needs to cut off the kingmakers, if at all there will be kingmakers.
Right.
Only then will he be able to take personal responsibility and ensure that there is transition as opposed to the problem we are facing right now. And also ensure that these individuals who convinced Dr. Mutunga don't end up using the Judicial Service Commission or the judiciary to undertake their witch hunts, to undertake complaints that lead to the waste of a lot of public funds, like we have seen with the Tenure Tribunal. Those are things that the Chief Justice...
Are you saying that Tenure Tribunal is a waste of funds?
Yes, it's a waste of public funds.
Why?
Well, it's quite apparent that the main people who pushed for this tribunal do not want this tribunal to go on. They don't want to testify in it. And these are Dr. Mutunga himself, Ahmed Nasir, Muite, and Issa. And look,
there's no way for you to know exactly what the intention is with the tribunal, right?
Well, we can see from the pattern that these people have taken us through. But fast forward, more recently, the same groups that appear to have been so much in control of Dr. William Mutunga are still controlling the succession process. They're also controlling the recruitment of the
You're making a lot of claims that I'm sure Professor Ojienda wants to respond to.
Of course, I'm sure that I don't know what Havi is apprehensive about. I do not know what kingmakers there were or are, because he says...
Do you consider him one of the kingmakers?
No. Of course not. Of course not.
Prof, are you a kingmaker?
Of course not. What do you mean?
Well, that's good.
I do not know which kingmakers is referring to or who the kingmakers were then. I also do not know who the kingmakers are now. But I know that the Judicial Service Commission is a fair commission, an objective, balanced commission, a learned commission that will make a choice out of the best candidates who will apply. I'll tell you this. It is the only commission that has 5 professors.
You included.
Of course. And I'll tell you this as well. It's a very objective commission that will look at the candidates and will ensure that we have a candidate that has the qualities that Havi is talking about.
Right.
One who has a philosophy.
Okay.
One
who has foresight, has international linkages. One who will appreciate the philosophy and the context of the law and the people of this country. Then one will understand Article 1 of the Constitution, that power, as set out in Article 1 of the Constitution and Article 159, derived from the people. And one who is a whole person. And I'll tell you this, Larry, we must debunk certain theories. We as a JSC are not looking for a man to be Chief Justice. We are looking for an all-rounded person.
A man or a woman?
Even if it's a woman, yes. And secondly, we're also looking at, we haven't ruled out any community from applying for Chief Justice.
Have you ruled out any people within the judiciary currently?
We have not ruled out any person from within or from without the judiciary.
Do you want this person to be an insider or an outsider? If you had your view, would you want somebody who's gone through the ranks to understand the judiciary inside out?
Yes, I think it's very important that for there to be proper transition, we need an insider.
Okay.
We don't want to have the mistakes that we have suffered during the tenure of Mutunga. We do not want a Chief Justice who will always be beholden or who will seek permission on what to do on everything that comes his way.
Gentlemen, I've got to wrap it up. So real quick, your final word on what exactly you're looking for in a CJ. You already mentioned some of these and your comments to him.
I've mentioned an all-rounded person with a philosophy, with foresight, who is wired and who understands the functioning of 3 arms of government.
Okay.
One who will deliver us from where we are to where we want to go, and that is to basically ensure that judicial transformation is complete. But one who will also ensure that magistrates and judges sit in court and listen to cases and will not spend too much time learning and going around doing conferences. I think that's the person we're looking for.
Okay. Real quick, you have a final comment?
Yes, we need a Chief Justice who is a born administrator. We need a Chief Justice who will be appealing to both the consumers of justice, the litigants and the advocates, and we need a Chief Justice who will ensure that there is interdependence between the 3 organs of the government and not to isolate the judiciary from the other 2 main organs of the government. I think that has been wanting in the current Chief Justice.
Gentlemen, thank you so much, Nelson Havi and Professor Ojienda, for coming out today and speaking to us about what we expect in the next Chief Justice. One more time, we expected Dr. Mutunga to join us tonight. Unfortunately, he was unable to because he fell ill in Kitui. We look forward to hosting him in the future.